You good?
Good as I'll ever be.
Contention 1 is framing. First is framing organization, ongoing violence, always tracking 12 feet. First is trying to structural violence, back to repeatable things, defense, security, mental health, new vaccine, risking against security, display, as a windows, economic equality, health, unemployment, domestic violence, structural violence, domestic program, struggle, provide even no support, welfare, adequate protecting security, the social structures as they are. It is East European immigrants, the security, one confidence, trying to track your inequality, especially like everything. Immigrants are great, you're much likely to after structural violence. Second is risk analysis, prioritize probability, cancel rate, the risk defined by potential loss of marginalization, probably even the highest probability becomes relevant, loss goes to infinity. Risk measures, rational breaks down, uncertainty, irrational balancing, access possible security, weapons, the logic, catastrophe, catastrophe, have irrespective of human activity, no political action could prevent them the most serious issue that would create discontinuous scenarios with no possible trading. The most absurd scenarios gain chain potentiality likelihood internal the repression possibility. Each internal chain exponentially reduces the likelihood of the next. Canada 98 scenarios gain incredibly the all possible force which even most force combines the number of links which we see the possibility of the one probability like your control is the possibility of interference with the least neutral outcome resulting structural highly selective view the uncertainty how to recover over the horde dangerous path no probability by lowering the establish possible standard. Third is no great power conflict. Trump makes it obsolete. Perceived unpredictably means that other countries won't escalate and allies will develop economic ties. Jacobson in 17 concerned domestically over Trump the currency will showing the world police alliances and world levels of America for supporting allies increase defense spending presumed capabilities lacking making research by average sales like wicked more positive pictures than you say such as which all is not really as with the economic issues with American exceptions and Trump is supported embrace and maybe appear advantageous to appear unpredictable because he just greater concessions and Japan adopted record of South Korea reacted by providing increased defense American self-confidence will try nearly bombs brought to Russian China they have no idea what Trump may do. Trump reduces reasonable confidence consequences are likely mutual shame when you think no punishable needs to be fighting for the order to favor negotiation or provocation but institutional checks prevent miscalculation coach on some team mounting pro-surfing the establishment code illustrate key to pressure turn of Russian man made to look like a powerless Russian Republicans be having in the Russian House overruling Russian imposed legislation that stipulates Trump lives usually with Congress this President Son Republicans told Trump to back up the attorney general the advisor study Trump developments roles within the military by pastor chosen matters making Trump to triumph with the Constitution now Congress they can really push making the permission and social checks and can significantly limit the damage. The consensus of empirical evidence proves to trend Sokolowski in 16th world has entered permanent properties the interstate conflict precipitously times within number of states tripling decide unless the three countries are going for the 40 zero exit strategies for behind the global 16 states never opportunity cost more to resolution but internet cases and living the war and promoting on each flight 7 people shot down and most special rushes by the involvement of community shows saying choosing travel examples of globalization. Contention 2 is Stumpers the court stealing of landmark education rulings and upcoming controversy Bomboy in 18 federal action fact general review the 5th amendment cases there's my overall the Georgia Better the 233 Cal California Teachers Association Celebrate Agency US Microsoft and Volta overseas the court of the field this about funds of political health voter ID policies Gorsuch chess flip liberal on immigration case Associated Press the 418 definition of crimes is unconstantly to the Supreme Court Rule 5 for the last saying because it was safe and favorable liberal by Gorsuch in case we sound like 4-4 but along ideological lines Gorsuch turned out to be kind of productive. DeVos is preempting the states on education CBS 18 CBS responded to DeVos' preemption by regulatory runs counter the state federal balance authority. Trump passed a huge education bill UG Fusa 18 Trump and legislative priorities give funding for you including development efforts supporting special education lawmakers for Trump's attempt to gather budget left in major school choice industries and the police spending $2.6 billion the highest appropriation Title I rising with $1 billion appropriation or the present measure also bans funds of reorganization decentralization reduces staffing and also responsibility top Democrat president bipartisan agreement work Republicans to increase funding for workers about trying to cut. Contention Contention 3 is the advantage. Reasonable standards, green light, unprecedented student searches, HLR in 15. Schools that rely upon law enforcement students, of course, reasonable supervision, constantly supervision, ignores criminalization behavior, better support require that officers of the public cause of the criminalization led to increase the outcomes, reasonable supervision, doctrine of the public, the TL, found that strike the balance of the public cause, the reasonable suspicion. The court explicitly in Veronia, the court explicitly incorporated the assessment of the court claim reasonable suspicion applies to administration. Those searches calcify inter-school violence, overwhelming data, proves they disparately target marks like students, create violent law enforcement interventions that serve no utility. HLR, in fact, there's been a massive increase in security personnel offers by 55%, districts paying zero tolerance, the soldiers prescriptive laws broadly reporting students non-criminal infractions, jurisdictions, criminalized behavior, reasonable suspicions that even require that suspending the students breaking the law by violating a rule, police are more involved in searching anti-disciplinary children push out for the criminal justice system. The students are sentenced and adults avoid fewer procedural rights, they can have escalating impact of rapid violence and sexual abuse, assault, having a devastating about 35,000 offenders, or twice as likely as the Supreme Court. It's only guidance to ignore this police person eliminating Fourth Amendment rights, criminally school, while helping minority children, disabilities, low-income families. The planned judicial codification solves HLR on 15. Searchers could be held to a probable cause that it defines legal support for the courts, imported law enforcement with special needs, offerings of privacy, interest in the inhabiting of a law of potential searches would be quite low. Absent no requirement for pretext criminal activity, they could give the lead changing the standard, would diminish the disparities, the legal social economic balance, and should diminish the government's interest. The current of college officials report evidence that told official like discretion far from the rational lower for standards, the local word should not be dispositive of the executive rules, not force the Supreme Court declining extend the rules of proceeding under the trial. Scenario 2 is jurisprudence. It spills over to collapse Fourth Amendment jurisprudence broadly and its reverse causal Lynch states school search jurisprudence so Fourth Amendment in cases produce not benefit course show great effort to report through the Fourth Amendment all the time one domination, self-chain reaction, expected incursions when one right falls, the students stand up a chain far beyond the schoolhouse gate. The course follow the framework of legal consortiums, justify searches, self giving up schools, leave it at least course self-rule programs, and other constitutions by analogy. The course can take his hand, halt the dominant effect in it, place the seal creating public laws exempt for special needs, do not, searches do not man words probable cause, there's no shortage of crisis forces pure word, because within the school setting, the social needs, the course of differences provides so factor forward the amendments that sets a precedent to nullify discriminatory laws across the country. Old since 16, the Supreme Court's first legislation rule for fulfilling reasonable suspicion by opening the discretion Supreme Court and gives racial planning. Several studies show the robust bias of stopping for self-defense of supporting law enforcement terminalization. The court did the ruling appearance as a relevant factor. The Supreme Court authorized the police to use race. The Supreme Court sanctioned penal penalty in the matter under the Fourth Amendment. The court power victim challenge the admission of evidence. This Scalia's ruling left people with their owners have an entry burden. There's no counterpart inability to many any claim of limited utility. Avoid conviction. The Fourth Amendment offered no prosecution. Otherwise, failure erases a bulwark of legal protection. And since 17, the world of issues available to declining Fourth Amendment rights are used to reward record of series decisions after revolutions not hold for the member of the court look at that search compliance students must submit to examinations. These nobody in private studies the Supreme Court reverse the censor the nationwide epidemic where was over the construction in every school district to pave the way for an array of practice including searches and development sectors security dimension suites our search develop cameras there creating an intense prison-like environment causes legally codified discrimination systematic racism and poverty and hence in 70 over life we attribute the poor student outcomes. As students behind, as the children perceive their treated as criminals, passing and flights of the conflict security measures are a competitor to the school person public school official automatically refer students to the legal law. The exclusion may stigmatize them. The critical access to resources and empirical evidence have treated the problems, including unemployment, poverty, about how the students change their relationship with punishment. The Supreme Court is key. Circuits splits ensure qualified immunity. Tape report 14. Qualified immunity granting schools officials enormously way initially for the members' rights very after the reasonable standard of government school churches that teachers can accurately because the confusion law will protect them in the law and very circuits exception qualifications rather clearly established standard teachers. Mary QI notion of the teachers can connect search with a little field like enforcement because it's responsible in all situations. The court teams are constitutional by teachers will receive qualified degree for the law continues to raise students we have no for the member rights. Cases will be appealed and overturned. Bottom 17. All the QI cases by the same way of finding immunity for officiality. We wrote 27 cases. Officials all one all but two. The court regularly minds over course this is not enough to violate the Fourth Amendment makes over defined and denying immunity that case will lower court confidence regularly referring on liability but never for immunity. The since the signal that the lower court find the violation Supreme Court was forcefully the Russell does not accident of course just in great decision for refuse the must get the immunity the dispensation from territory as the qualified immunity. The court is explicitly knowledge privilege that the court corrects lower courts when the subject offers liability. The court's not just maintaining the immunity but doubling down and enforcing against the lower courts. Independently chills litigation. Clark contend the direct constitutional standards of chilling of the suits against the officials of the lower court. No be personally possible for plaintiff to accept that QI protective school officials the immunity will provide unless a prior case be held beyond constitutional staffers. The only search key where the search was reasonable. The actually taking damage will end with the district court granting immunity. The plaintiff will have a viable argument. The second argument for any damages lawsuit will be shown because any appeal must overcome the reasonableness. There will be nothing to refute. I'll read the plaintiff's United States federal government to substantiate increases regulation elementary and secondary education in the United States under the Fourth Amendment, including at least establishing a higher standard for student searches. SCOTUS doesn't need to strike down the counterpoint, just the existence of conflicting federal precedent with state ruling. Section 16, the Supreme Court similarly refers to the high court and the was under limitations. Supreme Court was private limited with the federal court that the was fully constitutional with the overall Supreme law only the Constitution should base it. Supreme Court is independent trust orders. The interpretation binding banner follows the statute. Holdings binding all lower courts. The Supreme Court need not issue the same interest in the lower courts of rule of federal exercise. All lower courts recognizes.
Time for lunch. Are you gonna send it out?
Yeah, so it is sent.
So, is it okay if, can I just pull it?
Yeah.
So this is the last page, but I didn't read that. Okay.
Thank you. So, okay, 10 minutes.
Yeah, by the end of
Can you do this? Actually, it's
How much?
8:40.
Sorry, how much?
840.
1 second, I'm just trying to.
Yeah, that's all right.
You're good.
So the plan is not get rid of school searches.
No.
Spillover scenario. How does the plan spill over?
Because our evidence says that the TOC green-lighted the usage of reasonable suspicion as a standard, which has been applied in other contexts for discriminatory ends.
Like what?
Like, for example, immigration rates, like
Immigration
police searches.
So outside of schools, you solve.
Yeah, well, yeah. The quote from the spillover ev, I forget what the name is. The Lynch ev, it says it has like expanded quote outside the schoolhouse gates, and they give some examples.
Okay. How do you spill over to other discriminatory policies within schools?
Well, it's the same reason we spill to outside of schools, because the plan rules that reasonable suspicion is not.
Okay, but like, so those seem to be in the context of only searches. Do you get rid of discriminatory policies that
Well,
aren't
the
searches?
basis is that reasonable suspicion is not a good standard. So if other policies rely on reasonable suspicion as a justification, those no.
But those, what policies that aren't searches rely on reasonable suspicion?
Well, I don't really know. In schools,
yeah, well,
like our argument is like searches.
okay, but you just said
Are there
that you
any
just said that
others?
plan would spill over
So for
based on
Like
just
if there were, I don't have any off the top of my head.
Like some schools might have metal detectors,
Okay.
like at entrance gates. Those detectors can be based on reasonable suspicion
Okay,
versus
but
probable cause.
You just talked about how the
surveillance
basis of that
cameras.
decision is discriminatory policies. Would
Well,
the
no,
plan-
it's that the reasonable suspicion standard allows discrimination.
Yeah,
Okay,
most of
oh,
it's,
okay,
like,
so the
pretty
plan would
good.
spill over-
It's like the plan's ruling motivates suits against those other things.
Okay, against discriminatory policies broader than just searches.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
That makes sense. The SCOTUS strike down argument, this EV says that they've upheld the constitutionality of searches. Why does that mean
we
that
actually
no-
read another piece of evidence which
Yeah.
says that 27 litigants tried to go against it and only 2 won.
Okay, so the strike down evidence is in the context of individual citizens suing.
Well, it's,
Well,
what do you
I
mean?
don't think so.
Oh,
yeah, I
wait.
don't think it's just about
'Cause
that.
I don't think it's
in
just-
the context of those suits broadly. It does include individuals.
Okay, but where does this make the claim?
And also presumably litigation is like prompted by like,
Yeah,
the
but
students
it-
suing the schools.
just to be
saying
clear,
that they were
it's not
unjustly
about
searched.
it's not about laws or regulations that were struck down.
Well, no, what do you mean?
No. Okay.
Well, our argument is
the-
that the students said that this was a bad standard. Supreme Court said no.
Yeah.
We have ruled that it is a good
Hey,
standard.
yeah,
Like,
so you have
even-
EV that the constitutionality was upheld. You do not have EV that says regulations that ban the searches were struck down. Do you?
No, we have evidence that says when people try to get administrators to have to stop those searches, that was struck
Okay,
down. Administrators don't have
yeah,
to
those are
follow
two different
the
things,
laws
though.
because
The-
they know
They're
let's
that-
talk about the
absolutely
plan.
not, because it's a
that's
constitutional
fine. I'm
ruling
moving on. The
that
plan,
the Supreme
um,
Court interpreted the Constitution,
Okay,
not a
that's fine.
statutory
If
law.
schools don't increase a higher standard, what happens? Student litigate.
Oh,
What's the
you mean
enforcement
that
mechanism?
in the context if they don't fall through the
Yeah.
act?
Mhm.
Yeah, they'd be held in contempt of court.
Okay, so litigation is the solvency mechanism.
That's a large
Well,
one, yeah.
our argument is that obviously for like if something's declared
Okay,
unconstitutional,
what other
just-
enforcement mechanisms are there besides student litigation?
Well, we think that if SCOTUS makes a ruling, it reverses the incentive that administrators have.
Have
right
you
now
read
to
evidence
run
about
more
reverse causal
enforcement.
ev that like racist
Yeah,
administrators
the
will get
Lynch
rid of?
chart is really good. It like literally says
Which
kind
card
of,
do you
like,
think says
reverse the domino effect of the Fourth Amendment. The Lynch evidence.
840. Yeah. I can probably just, yeah.
It's Adolf, framing, and then the advantage.
How much time do you have?
No, I don't like it.
818.
Yeah.
It's sketchy. The other thing is, yeah. Like, why?
Paid off framing event.
Oh, we have 2 more sheets. Right, 1 more sheet. I flowed cross-sex, I really fucked everything up.
I feel like I need 5 more sheets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh boy, I have 5.
We collectively need 4 more pieces of paper. Yeah, I mean, it's your fault. So.
I have a very small amount left, sorry. I would give this to you.
Wait, 4 total, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Each
Alright,
one
give me a second.
responsible. Wait, what was the case order?
Framing and the advantage.
You don't have a thumpers, frontline,
We'll answer that in the block if it applies.
Okay, I'm just gonna put it on the floor.
Yeah. We'll probably run it this way. Alright, so we're good?
Yeah.
First off, is midterms, that's when I eliminate terms of the adventure when you present a sexual election which terms are opposed to problems at diversity. The dynamics of members of the adventure and policy say there are certain vote. Judicial activism shaped election holding it. In 16 policies started turning every recent referendum of the court's rights and lead most important state education networks in the hands of judge the court's matter of voters and the insurance can be attention. They are about enriching energized court supporters. Key to contain populism. PM 17 populist parties across the world learn they liberal order like Lucy Steve Events on the of the U.S. where teach vendors and colloquially favor national authority. Rome's a separate 20 nation to go down as an aberration. It doesn't happen. Polarization will deep institutional checks make serious or significant damage. Extinction to all 16 we have problems available. We unpick a global PC. And states are emboldening middle functions, harvest of thing, nuclear weapons reaction, problems assembles, and trade towards territory suits important to maintain public and security the future of the planet. Next off topicality, education regulation can't be courts want. In education regulation, merchant need to legislative advance make laws right to merchant direct result regular effect the education the effect of law only when they are adopted by agents. So court to repeatedly have the regulation must be found in public order to be effective as a matter of law violation. The FDL court prefer one is limits the topic authority massive line court action creates a possibility for rulings to endless summercation. There related education sex conversation, the literature assumes regulation and funding come from legislative fans, no course court actions like all potential dissent links in U.S. are bad. That's predictable research directly favors the effort disclosure to locus and education or interpretation. You could read no but you have to disclose in 30 minutes to be for the debate. The next office the counterplan text the United States Congress should align regulation quarters of elementary and secondary education with the in loco apprentice standard advanced school searches. Next off
read this out for this one.
And all the in loco apprentices the idea that school officials function very similarly to parents and tutors overseeing children to solve the upstream and the school official would have to respect basic constitutional right given which would prefer against the unconstitutional discipline the local apprentices to give school official right of their discipline suits they send a signal to the court chain appropriate to the policy moving the lawsuit the either standard would allow an official discipline to more fairly so you can see the serious infraction without the fear of the court to stable to this one policy about the threat of school violence and help prevent the students from following criminal behavior at seekers to 2% next also this that good schools are sufficient solve inequality so 2018. Education may be economic opportunity, public education, lead upward economic mobility, was as well as the income inequality. The study confers a strong link between the quality schools and the opportunity to reducing high school dropout severely. Twice the benefit of rate upward mobility, school quality short-term impacts also has a long-term impact. Legal interventions that just prevent teacher from effective education wasn't technically conditional legal, so you need teachers to behave defensively even with the doing so complex with education does seem to occur even with legal positions or public diversity. Official got out of the way to accommodate drop behavior, each judicial imperfection more apparent that the courts are absolutely legal role in the ambition to perform effort to go to me. They create an ongoing enforcement regime despite unstable doctor lack of individual standards, disruption, ruins achievement, future earnings, carelessness, the results indicate the impact of disruptive peers in the adult adding one student to reduce the high school test and reduces their earning 1 year effect, so which disrupts the reduce the total earnings by 880,000 differential like most reduce disrupt the student takes around 5% of the earnings gap. Growing economic inequality drives diversion, internationalism, source and offshore common sold 11 nationalism of the security inequality states engaging more national making when inequality increasing nothing inequality small more important symbol national sense many global service and primary defense states may forfeit national rates of 7 to inequality. This can lead to household here to minorities and our countries household or the national and private and if under result no more military support policy no more inventions world war policy economic inequality to lead to national complications inequality make more it changes the world. This next office the states counterplan 50 states are all in territory should be in the use of searches in schools. Next office topicality education means across the land within schools distinct from broader school inclusion. If they want to schools to come as body student faculty make sure employees are institutional make education more regular extra parts of learning so voting issue protect limits expand topic include the entire school so makes of anything tangentially related to education expects a voting issue causes the F conditionality makes it impossible to read next position ESA and then solves the ESA counterplan text the United States federal government should substantially reduce regulation elementary secondary education sub health and safety center reduce restriction providers of educational services on the universal education safety account that are progressively allocated financial support property and educational quality information based educational reach to local stakeholders. ESA sponsors accommodation choice results in accountability and also turns the urban and 16 by making education provide directly accountable parents to educate marketability right the incentive less regulated the system consistently outperform more centrally regulated breach rate 15 to 1 in the district based school center shut out minority votes holding education directly accountable parents creates a feedback loop is not existing more centralized it top down system legislature schools is possible to strengthen the correct areas more effectively regulatory politics
Go to case first.
okay framing. Extinction first, rate intervention 91. Concept of the modern party probabilities consider Russian relation can maintain the probabilities of relevant and probability of fatality made to declaiming the probability of accidents or probabilities in nuclear action. The real concern of estimates that subjective predictions are accurate and show indicate the individuals can find all the information on how to evaluate who likes to loop people like an ultimately devastation new society ability change and domains are required. Yes, war Anderson to sure 118 nuclear or became likely to jump out also can change on weapons of pay depressant emotional lead to maximum third coaching you mixing and nuclear sign nuclear turns into if all the arsenals been right opportunity to nuclear war possible the US uses nuclear weapons red lines supports and been crossing the advantage all causes the school to prison pipeline TFA into operative incarceration and every people in equality through students cannot read well and general welfare lack of opportunities so now access to adequate education literacy. There's a strong correlation people to incarcerate their reading love to continue discrimination because of race and incarceration more often.
Oh, I was thinking on the counterpoint, should we add a plank to solve the like spillover stuff?
No, because then it would probably lead to innovation. But we can keep it later if you want
Okay.
to have one.
Courts fail. Robinson 7th. When courts decision moving on to get the current political consensus and control backlash services on by school, social policy, and general legislative progression might avoid some of the backlash of the court of corruption, the generation rates group text and bringing less lasting congressional concern represent the only effect of the counterbalance local legislature like the knowledge about the education rate that the judgment will work hard according to knowledge of lack of expertise and projects before legislative form court decision and virtually no direct advantage segregation while the same decisions work by backlash against civil rights.
Just had a plank that bans immigration searches. Sure.
Okay. Counterplan.
Which one?
The Congress.
Or Congress or states?
Both.
Okay, this is going to be on both. The actor should ban immigration searches outside of schools. Alright, back to the case. Courts limit litigation, cancel over violations of the lack of participation, negotiated contribute the limited, discussful implementation, and open rights action runs against judicial practice would seek to effective a resolution by controlling participation outside active involvement in punch and settlement, persistent and related implementation of the courts on the open their participation in their response in the court imposed this law and teaches the plan won't create a meaningful precedent blacken. Attend even the courts or public courts, I think the authority of the legislative job, but I think in function drafting legislation, safe funding formula, still fail to security reach of the actual history needs of litigation, also will be maintain equity funding overturn litigation, process tackle litigation, funding court lack of the vast rejected. In future judicial orders watered down the F. Robinson 7, of course, they informed the budget the issue, the inability to actually the additional expenditure can encourage the agreed to expend low level to undermine the addressing inequalities. Courts empirically can't solve an education as well as Congress done. 11 attempts to use the courts to reform legislative education principle. Example, the courts here just not very good at politically fair and legitimized opinions, so the court in more detail. The courts is very efficient become a like the law when it in gender. Future students Robertson said you can't expect to get a whole list of education regulation from the court. We want to be very good at the history reform case summarize good intentionally to bad results. Court action subject to judicial capture turns the F done. 11 educational litigation. Of course, we come in politically manipulated content concept that certainly never interests the plain distinction term. Actually, no single from the filtering institute and also the group successfully petitioned to intervene in the absence litigation of the students had including loss and follow legal litigation proved as something inflexible to legal processing about the courts to treat all the groups equal as a result like say they came over to information because the courts and they over the effects of legalism, no good info they can assault lots and information probably can't find the courts that's why the education okay the education roots and the notorious and consistent the quality yes it is the precisely the reach of the courts may either do the order reforms and it is not that glue that run class size reduction represent the most effective use of funds to wrong side proven probably judge responding to school finds adequate claims.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Politics. Opioids passed out from the 18th. The Senate committee approved bipartisan legislation motion for the integrated advance wealth and progressive time of the Congress. The Pakistan will be bipartisan to person health. The Pakistan will likely more contested. This is the proposal of the team had the chance of making a difference in the Senate. Panel advance bipartisan. Nobody Pakistan deal with the emergency bill and work with the House states. Requires you need to attention the F changes that limit on 12 the arson realization of the federal law highly polarized campaign. The often debate with the violence agreement to federal local control the education represents the United States. The federal policy and education agency league reformly seek to with the environment the country being a much more poison to become more difficult chance of education. Education has been polarized in the first time the market at the first time the field across the interest TB escalation wound color control the people that have opioid drugs conditions so the wet TB the treatment is difficult to achieve the communities of right drug multi-drug resistant TB extinction farm market in 13 well widespread drugs and TB out of control incidents are rising deadly condition furtherly incurable disease aids and approach the existential threat the 1/3 of the world's population is infected with the drug resistant TB infection are highly likely the drug resistant reduce the treatment access.
Success.
That's market or success. Yeah. Market success.
And we did mark the education polarization group. First time, I think.
It was like first time.
Sorry, let me just copy.
Yeah.
You saw the counterfund texts.
Yeah, can you send them out? Like,
Yeah.
Actor should be.
He was like, it's on both. I was like,
Which actor?
I think I would like auto 29/7 just for that moment.
I'm curious which actor.
Auto what?
Like,
I don't know.
should
Whatever.
expand?
I'm sending out the
the actor of the counter.
I'm just confused. I just think there's a lot of ambiguity.
Alright, I sent out politics. I will send out the texts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
funny.
Oh, I'm sure.
Alright, yeah. Is it okay? Do you want me to? Can I just send out the plank that was added?
Yeah.
Alright, it's sent. Both things are sent.
okay. You good? Okay. What is the local parental standard?
Loco parentis devolves the authority for decisions over education to, I guess it defers that authority and decision making for education, things like searches, all that to the schools.
To local school administrators? Yes.
Okay, so what's the recourse if a student thinks that their right has been violated by the said administrator?
Two things. First is the evidence says that it's not just like there was no court oversight, but rather like if it's blatantly unconstitutional, it can get struck down. Second is our evidence makes
Well,
the
so,
claim.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Can I keep going?
That's fine.
Okay. Okay, the evidence makes the claim that discipline rates would be more fair in the world of the counterplan because in the status quo, discipline and administrators don't discipline equally because you're afraid of lawsuits from more privileged kids,
Okay,
i.e.
so
white kids,
the
kids who
counterplan-
have money.
So the counterplan gives those administrators more flexibility. Why wouldn't they just mean that they discipline everybody?
That's what I was.
Yeah,
well, that's
what Aiden
yeah.
was just
And
saying.
the bottom of the card says that when in loco parentis occurred, discipline rates dropped to 2% because of the deterrence mechanism, and also they were more fair because they didn't just discipline kids on the capability that they thought they would sue, but discipline them on whether they acted.
It says in one study, the probability of an individual arrest decreased from
And it was a
62%.
study of the counterplan.
It was like in one district. Like that doesn't.
No, it's a study. No,
That's
it's a
fine.
study of different ones, and that study compiled them and said
Yeah.
it reduced rates.
Okay. Good schools now. Why are they good?
They're effectively solving inequality. Well, you also have to frame it through the uniqueness of the counterplans. So the counterplans reduce the ability for things like litigation against schools. It defers to school administrators and teachers, both of which provide uniqueness for that.
Yeah, but
Additionally,
Loco
the
Francis has
swing-
made an argument that they don't have like absolute difference, and you increase that and make it more effective. If that's true, then like why are schools good now?
The swing card says that it's leading to upward economic mobility, easing income inequality. Our argument is that when disruptions happen in schools, that's way more likely to result in, I guess, a reduction of income.
And also,
reduction
deference
of
is high now.
education quality.
Deference is high now.
Yeah.
If you prove it's not, counterplan solves.
Okay. The ESA's counterplan. So our evidence says that searches occur in like most public schools, like over 50%. Does the counterplan then result in all of those parents taking their kids out of like over half of American public schools and shoving them into the other half?
Yeah, it's the counterplan is universally weighted or progressively weighted, so that kids who are disproportionately affected by things like discriminatory policies would get more money. So most likely, the kids who aren't disciplined now racially, like white affluent kids who stay in public schools because those public schools are good, wouldn't get as much money, or maybe even any money to leave. So kids like black students would be able to leave. Second is we'll say that vouchers, even if they all leave public schools, that just creates a system of really, really good private schools who have to cater to those kids, and then they would not have CTPs.
All right, that's fine.
Or like searches, because there's no
Yeah, not
economic
CTPs, sorry,
incentive.
searches. I mean, I think it's something that this one does.
What's the net benefit to ESA?
Innovation. Who was the
Did we read a course?
Where are we right
Yeah.
now?
Then probably
Where are we?
Yeah, midterms. too.
midterms and
Yeah, no, like,
midterms innovation. Yeah.
Campbell.
You have
yeah, I've always been disappointed.
Yeah, I did. I sent it. Yes.
I mean, they're definitely gonna go for T because
I said T curve and T cooch.
neither of those are responsible. Okay. The rest of it is states. United States counterplan.
Yeah.
DeVos VA. The thumper
Executive
slays
power.
that single-handedly.
Executive power cannon. The truncated dog frame. PT, as I said.
Oh, wait, I'm missing something.
I read a card about contagious cancer.
Yeah, I just saw you.
1 second. What? Yeah, that's great. Make sure it wasn't someone in C1.
See what happens.
714.
I think 818. We have 818, right?
Yeah, you do.
I think I'm like
When you put it that way, you're so on. Damn, wow, today's a really
You
good
really
day.
like sound. Okay, so
I really like Josh.
I don't think they know we have them.
You know what? Great.
Oh, yeah, we do. No, really good. Yeah.
Do they know?
I don't, based on the face, they don't know. Well, that changes.
I don't really know, but we're talking about what the one in C had. A new one.
Forests.
Like
Did you?
it increases the funding to a funding stream that's derived from selling timber.
Do you want me to
It's a thing.
Okay. There's salty on the
everyone good for an order?
It exists now. You think?
Yes.
There's no solvency anything for our app. One. There's no solvency.
Anything.
Shut up.
It's the advantage. Thumpers,
Oh god.
gravies. T-cords.
Can you start thinking that?
The advantage. Thumpers. Framing. T-courts / new apps. T-education. Congress. States. ESAs. Midterms. Politics. Schooling inequality. The whole thing is the whole thing.
In online level.
Advantage. Thumpers. Framing. Topicality courts. Topicality education. Congress. States. ESAs. Midterms. Politics. Schools. Yeah, what kind of name is school?
It's the schools to sex. It's so we can know link it up your innovation. It's the schools. It's so we can know link it up your innovation answers. That's cool.
Alright, got him. Anyone not good? Searches criminalize students, fake court standards offer circuit twisting use as a shield which causes mass incarceration, poverty, and abuse. It spills over and so forth and litigation broadly through self-mass inequality. All causes don't matter because the act calls of transmotions of violence and motivates broader students that I'll explain. More below, 1 and T2 assumes a status quo dribble fiat ensures compliance because violence holding contempt of court and the plan gets to fiat the federal government litigation would happen. Lynch says the plan reverses the domino effect of forming the class right now and elevates higher standards, which encourages public advocacy suits. It means all violators will be struck down. This ensures 1 and T3 and 4 the route status quo bad precedent being muddled. The plan clarifies it, which is a dissent to both counterplans because their actions wouldn't be enough to change the court system, but the app would solve that because it would standardize circuits. But probably 1 and T5 and 6 don't apply because they're about post-finance litigation. Rodriguez, not the app, which is different because it rules in a very clear confusion of precedent by changing the reasonable suspicion standard. The last part doesn't link because we have enough data about the fourth. Any 2 and T clarification mirrors a new 20 hours explanation about litigation, the framing advantage, or rather the thumper stuff. Tons of education now. The court's sharing rulings on teacher unions, political buttons, and searches in school, plus the omnibus funded education by over $1 billion, and the boss establishing new mandates for education allocation, framing ongoing balance outweighs because the ignoring it creates cognitive dissonance that allows for violence to accumulate with political justification, which causes their impacts. It turns future generations because it allows more long-term violence, prioritize probability because it maximizes logic and smart decisions, since any action could cause extinction, multiply the risk of each of their internal link and link change uniqueness, etc. to reduce the chances of near zero. If there are no wars, war is unlikely. Trump reduces the risk because he shifts other countries to mad, fear the nuclear button, checks about Congress, hotlines, and military leaders, constrain escalation, data proves the lowest level of war in history. Their app is also generally garbage, so keep that in mind when involving probability questions. T course, we need the plan text is GSFT, which from the best of word based in burdens, so is leaving on that includes which of course are back in all the vegetarian elevation, as controlling elevation, the increase of high perspective, which for the first time, everything rich age, elevation, into by an body, the lower course of elevation, more posture, catcher, spiritual bound and barge, preferred ace, after ground, after each accent, makes a pseudopods, cancer, competitive, and sex, that shoot from the next state towards the Congress, which turns fairness, public education, BS, predictability, warlock, defines the case on index, their first in game, protection, outweighs, because liquid, craft, arbitrary, and its terms for offense, functional, limit solves, the final number of advocates, and all of them overlap, there's an ace actions, which still links to their offense, courts, count make it even, reasonability, is best of worst, cousins got out, we get, you guys have to dispose them on the wiki and send a copy after, the one you see preferred, disclosure, kills, innovation, sentiment, towards debaters, not coaches, or most critical thinking, debate is game, anything else arbitrary and unfair, cross-sex, and legit, generic, check your offense, education, the plan guarantees, classroom access by keeping students in, education, the structure of the school system, the United States education, this is the financial school, the classroom, the education, the structure of educational processes, who influence policy, preferred A's, background from outside the states and outside federal jurisdiction, B's, background, no one has decided to a class, just education as a whole, C's, overwhelming excludes D's, like this one's training, ideas, Title 1, etc., which is bad, Congress, perm to the count, doesn't be by a text or a function, which is bad for ability, perm be bold, it should have takes action in concert, doesn't solve searches, A's, QI's, officials are legally exempt from liability, they can refuse to comply, and it's possible to sue them because circuit splits afford a shield, all 27 of those cases have been reversed as 7-4, and but he is forum shopping, judicial legislative disagreements cause administrators to, I answered you guys bad, to address the business cases in federal courts, bypasses the count plan because we're on the right to discipline. Asian count plans are bad because they steal the content of the 118 anti-education will get struck down because it violates the 10th Amendment since education is a state power in the first place, unconstitutional because also because local practices are determined by the courts. It also doesn't solve because it only gives parents constitutional rights which are insufficient in the status quo. It doesn't solve the jurisprudence advantage because it doesn't access any from the application to other cases. Else litigation without expand on cases. It defers litigation because the existence of court rulings means students are unlikely to sue. It links to that benefit because it's equally unprecedented and defies the court's interpretive authority. The state actually, if I missed any of the procedurals, are bad because they're non-resolutional, arbitrary, and unfair. All of our offense applies. The state's count on permutation do both. It shows that benefit because it provides a cover or distraction in terms of the count on can't solve federal searches. It can't ban them because that trigger preemption since states can't control immigration. Federal 17 the internet because of immigration status. Trump order grant enforcement and federal authorities wrong with full schools. The police officers are station immigration authorities and federal authority and federal arresting procedure sentence agencies. 50 states get as bad because this sorts of affects background and education. SCOTUS is never not struck down the count on felt intending court constitutional section because this is actually given the jobs of AGLO. Found reasonable for India. Reverse apology assessing and all the appeal to be overruled after the second circuit for the 9th circuit and regardless of the court decides the case they will lose a link to that benefit because the Arab describes suits in lower courts. It's just unprecedented. Conditionality is bad because it spurs tweets the added state occurs running down which causes race to the margins and sophistry over effective debate. The ESA's count plan permutation do both. Permutation do the count plan and permutation do the after ESAs. It links to that benefit because it creates debate over education, especially if it just ends on public schools, which obviously would trigger the link if they have one to the app. Searches are constitutionally allowed. Private experts can't solve them. Every other deficit applies. Black kids will still be discriminated against in private schools, and if they make them exempt from current public law, which they have to do to get them out of public schools, then that means that lawsuits against them would be ineffective, so kids wouldn't solve it. It also obviously doesn't solve all of our spillover stuff. That proves that suits fail or worse for marginalized students on the Mulling and Bunker in state, or not suits, the counterclaim 16. Vouchers simply indicate that students are simply underserved. Only 50% of voucher students have disabilities. The private schools are now required by special ed to have no services. Value vouchers depends on students with disabilities in private schools. In the same proportion, private schools that came from federal accountability, academic achievement are unavailable. The midterm stuff, numbers and other blue wave areas exist with capacity for Frank Sisters, confirmation of programs of voters with land, students, voters, Scott Ruki, Jackson, any investigation, voters, journalism, indicted racial speculation voters are looking for training, confidence, corruption, and compromise of ways to be Washington. No impact. The Penn Italian elections give MCA torture all away the internal link and the defense was done on case. No link. A. It's not tied to Trump. It's a court ruling. Trump would have bashed the court. This is a form of B. It's football thing. Trump promised the opposite of the ass. They wouldn't turn out. SCOTUS is insulated and polarization. That way it's already 16 the impact. Maybe marginal research shows the court on important voters who touch the even just as people are paying attention to the high polarization of raising the votes unlike messages that change voters' minds. The less engaged or less likely to fall out. Corporate voters who see the picture have already remember their minds. So black swans and predictions empirically fail. Education doesn't matter. I'm going to read it. Route 18.
Don't read that part.
Okay, fine. Politics. Thumpers, new investigation, infrastructure, and immigration fights, no impact or internal link, other countries, medical fraud, all outweigh opioids, and doctors that just give them out anyways or restrict them regardless without being controlling since they can't solve it broadly. Fiat solves a link by absolving that. Cash is not intrinsic, it's not opportunity cost of the app. Courts shield from risking 17 branches can enforce against political majorities, judiciaries, motions of political pressure, judges, law applies to the assignment of decreases that judge every election, judicial selection reinforces the majority can character of the court reflects many political views for jurisdictions. Mandatory issues are compartmentalized and from my gay marriage and Obamacare. It's bipartisan and backed by lobbies first and 15 opponents urging Congress to suspension. They say this is a part of Democratic lawmakers back American National Network of Civil Rights Preservation Campaigns and 24 states. Other lawmakers office lobby then the bipartisan agreement discipline reforms to make it the EXOs pass through the bipartisan support. Not intrinsic, I said that. But anyway, no guideline for how much PC has or how much bipartisan is necessary to pass the bill because they can't explain which constituents have to be appeased and there would still be a peace post-act. Why don't I read the other part of Richard?
Because there was about education. There were essays that opioids had created the sort of ADR diseases or whatever it was.
Yeah,
there's a reverse causal that way to prevent the diseases from like.
There's no reverse
mutating.
causality as far as they haven't solved them. So given that, I'm going to read a different card on midterms then. Midterms. Hacks swing the gills in 418 within the Senate Medalinga. Hackers in the other countries could join wrestling the ground to watch every tax interference with countries and the various singers and automatic confidence. Hackers will release a game to exploit the intelligence they gleaned. Still on midterms. Predictions are really bad, it's too far away, and their thumpers. Beacon 17. Pranks and status assume nothing. A criminal office campaign that through the face of hugging each other beyond impenetrable, nationalism and home settler narrative, topical public comfortability, makes it hard to get involved in racism, hostile taste ratio, most of taking place, makes it unknown to affect demographic, holographic continues to shift with ability will be interesting to watch. These schools' disadvantage is bad because core links exist now, adequacy suits, the end case, teacher unions, and etc. No impact, trade, infrastructure, and tax outweigh the internal links. Schools were insufficient because searches, teacher bias, and funding disparities all increase inequality. Plus, there's inequality outside of schools, and it's higher now because of Trump rulings. Another little flexible loss of 13 courses taken on pension to find the direction and far guided to check words about for this year role of enforcement of course connected to the guidance this creates the education adequacy jurisprudence and standard pressure registration and validate an unjust scheme. Link term resource positions are vague and in the standard plan is clear. It makes it easier for teachers to solve it. Zero link. It's about teacher compliance with court mandates that causes caution. Discipline the act against searches by officers that don't teach students. No perception link until they read 2 and see that a sufficient number of teachers would be conducting those searches to cause the impact. Case solved. It said remember those in the residential cost of spending students increase the number of dropouts fee which costs more than 11 billion. Kind of the rate and half would save 5.5 billion suspensions and post fiscal costs would reap substantial savings. These more robust evidence that suspensions cost taxpayers billions of dollars. Even a small reduction can save us hundreds of millions. If I didn't expend the spillover impact on case or lynch evidence, and the Olson evidence says that it spills over to motivate lawsuits for other examples of racial violence like police brutality, surveillance, drug policy, etc. because it encourages strength and Fourth Amendment that none of the counterpoints can solve.
For the, I think it was on states, you said that SCOTUS has never not struck down the counterplan.
Yeah.
This relies on someone, as a result of the counterplan,
Yeah.
going up, appealing to the courts, and in favor of searches.
Yeah, here's the
Who
big
does
thing about that. Administrators, officials, etc., people conducting searches know that they are constitutionally allowed to do so. This means they have no compliance incentive for either of the counterplans, and the only way that students can say, no, you have to comply is by suing them.
So does this mean like teachers and administrators like the searches?
Yeah, we have EV that says that there is an incentive in growing militarization of those schools.
Okay,
Police officers
what's
know
the
they have
incentive?
no authority.
What's the incentive for like school resource officers, etc.?
Well, a lot of people are worried about drummed up security fears.
Okay, so
That's
it's just like
one example.
security fears?
That's one example. There are also police officers that have implicit racial bias. They're eager to target black students in schools, etc.
Okay.
The reason they're so confident in doing so is because of the absolute lack of legal ground against them.
Okay, I guess the spillover arguments after the F happens, other students will sue for other racially discriminatory policies and things like that?
Yes, but it's a bit broader than that as well. Our evidence indicates that challenges under the Fourth Amendment will be more successful. Public advocacy campaigns, things that try to invalidate other policies have a higher success rate after the AF changes.
Okay, like public advocacy campaigns, students hear about the AF and then they just like sue
well,
the
there are
schools,
cases that are
or
going
what?
on now that we think would probably result in losses absent the AF, but that will also happen.
Okay, so the AF sets a precedent for those other cases to be effective.
Well, it sets a precedent broadly.
Yeah, I know, for those other cases to be effective for like when students sue schools.
The AF sets a precedent that results in greater efficacy of Fourth Amendment suits, yes.
Okay. The ESA counterplan says that vouchers are bad for students with disabilities.
Yeah.
What does the AF do for students with disabilities?
Well, no,
That's
it's
something
that vouchers are bad for them.
Yeah, it's that it's
Wait,
the,
but more
you
importantly,
don't
like,
claim that
more
the AF solves
more
this.
importantly, they don't get like strip search, like things that.
Right, I think the action of the AF is beneficial. for
Lynch
students
evidence
with
gives the example of
disabilities.
solitary confinement, which is something that happens to students with disabilities.
Because they're like,
wait,
they're
how does
separated
the
from other
AF
students.
how does the AF solve for things like solitary confinement?
Because it violates the standard set by the AF. They don't.
Wait,
they
how?
have-
It's a
wait,
Fourth
this is
Amendment
important.
standard.
Because when you take a student and say, oh, you did X, we have reasonable suspicion that you did X, and solitarily confine them, that would violate the AF.
Like our
Because-
Ed says solitary confinement.
So
Yeah.
if there's a different justification for things like solitary confinement or something else that isn't based off of like a reasonable
Yeah.
suspicion
Well,
that
okay,
the
so
student will do
That's
something
one of the
bad.
great things about the Fourth Amendment, which is that since it interacts so closely with it's true. Since it interacts so closely with due process, winning a Fourth Amendment violation supersedes most
Well,
other
also,
guarantees.
like-
Wait,
wait,
what's
wait,
the
hold on. More
interaction of the
importantly-
AF with due process?
Well,
That are what
because
we're
search
talking
is
about. Wait,
violent.
more importantly, if it violates the Fourth Amendment
Okay.
and doesn't violate the 14th Amendment,
Yeah.
it is still unconstitutional.
Exactly. Saying that it's constitutional for X reason does not moot the fact that it is unconstitutional for a different reason.
All right, reasons to reject T.
50 state fiat, agent counterplans, conditionality. I think that was it, right? Drew? Yeah. That was it.
818.
What's the evidence for the domino effect?
Lynch. Well, there's like Lynch, Olson, and Nance, but I think Lynch is probably the first card that you should look at.
Yeah, no, I know.
know.
I don't think we.
Oh, let me send out those midterm cards.
Yeah.
Dan and G chatted me about Thursday. He said the 1EC card about North American forests solving extinction was tagged lungs of the earth, but when Eva extended it, she said forests are fetal lung capacity. That just, it really made Dan disagree.
Yeah, but you need to specifically use.
Stop.
Toggle.
Sorry. Lock at 11.
Actually, sorry, one more second. Alright, stop at 5 time. Sorry, I just had to format it. No, I think someone in the team is there, but we have one here.
You said.
No, I was going to go to Natalie. It's him. Wait, are you all good for an order?
One second, drop. It's slow. Okay. Okay.
Okay, it's going to be the Congress counter plan, the ESA's counter plan, the state's counter plan, the framing page, the thumpers page, and then the advantage bar.
States is before like this.
What?
States is before the face stuff.
Yeah.
It's getting spicier and spicier.
Aiden, is Congress, ESAs, states framing Trumpers advantage?
Yes. Is anybody not ready? The Cal plans also first has a local apprentice stands which grants effort to administrators. That's also more for discipline. They can see that it reduced discipline rates and racial discrimination by 2%. Also made more fair discipline and search policies because they no longer were afraid to discipline and search white affluent kids who they thought would sue them. Second is to ban searches, which eliminates the disproportionate searches. Blind permutation due to the Cal plan is severance, default to businessity, and when I see cross said they use the courts as the best mechanism because it increases things like litigation. Vagueness is an independent voting issue because they can always shift around, which to see clarification, spike neck links, and means the blocks unbeatable. Permutation do both links that benefit because it has the course which builds over the exempt from liability arguments. The reason that administrators are exempt from liability now is because there's no standard, no federal law. The Crown plan has that, which means the DOE and the DOS can enforce that, and they would be very afraid of that, which means administrators would comply for the same reason they comply for the plan because of financial losses. The forum shopping argument doesn't assume the Crown plan. Yes, in the status quo, there are court splits. The reason there are court splits is because the federal government has not intervened. Yes, because there are no laws that the courts can interpret. The reason that courts have upheld the Constitution in litigation is because yes, there's a constitutional right to have those things against. Because there is not a law that bans them, they have no evidence to support this. Agent counter plans are good. First is education implementation of large policies. First, good debate. Second, strategic thinking. Encourage the app to write usually sound plan text. Third is research. Promotes research on benefits using a particular actor. Fourth is ground. During strategies are key to check new and unpredictable apps. It's especially true against new apps, checks, speech order, and reject the argument. Now the team, the strike down arguments. First is that in local apprentices is constitutional. This is not disputed. Second is that the evidence that they have has said that it was upheld in student litigation. The reason it was upheld was because there was no state law that banned it. Those are two different things. If a law, like things, searches can be constitutional, but that does not mean they can't be banned, which is proven by a litigation, like a litany of things that states ban that aren't unconstitutional. And durable fiat solves, and it's durably fiat, which means the courts were just ignored. They say it doesn't solve parents' right. Litigation is not needed in the word of the Crown plan because it's a federal mandate, which means there's no needs for litigation because the Crown plan gets rid of searches, so there's nobody to the federal government enforce that. They say spillover. The burden is on them to outline other policies that occur from a result of the act that aren't in immigration. The Crown plan bans immigration, which you can see it's solvency deficit. Litigation, that it's not needed. That's what it's about. It doesn't link to net benefit because we don't use the courts. ESA's count. Also, we can combine blanks, kick blanks, which means the Congress Crown plan could become the ESA's Crown plan and combine blanks in the 2R. ESA's Crown plan. Who knows at this point? Markets are the best form of regulation. Parents are best. They will demand what's best for their kids. Crime 15, the various implementation, lack of buy-in from stakeholders, lack of understanding, insufficient time to implement new strategies, inadequate allocation of resources, and efforts to build school class to implement school reform. Second is regulation fails so farther away from parents or cultural. The app fails. Metro 17 programs fail because regulation lacks local knowledge and feedback. The regulation occurs continuously in competitive marketplace to force competitors to figure out what is best. And the consumers good to get that boat provide value. Or we doubt those who please customers expand regulation based on parents with the best knowledge of what works. Regulation, how control decisions are made by further people who move individuals whose teachers school culture. And third is a robbery regulation. Bottom up is the only way they will be successfully implemented. Top down fails barn. Now 17 every school. Need economic condition, policy programs that works in some places and work, and many others teachers left. And then these initiatives no training resources, whether they can implement other changes support. Cultures have been implemented in schools to help new forms of accountability. Memo describes New Zealand and school data fabric problems. And it's required to develop a plan, permutation to links that benefit use of the courts, and then spills over permutation to account plan severs out of the courts and also severs out of not using ESAs and making ruling about higher standards, which severs the voting issue for fairness education. We can't guard stable links. Permutation to the act through the mechanism severs out of use in the courts, also severs out of a higher standard ruling. Links in that benefit no doesn't. We don't use the courts. Search is allowed argument. There are three things here. First is that black students who are disproportionately searched won't go to private schools that have searches. Second is that private schools won't search them because then they would just leave and then they would lose the money. Third is that new schools would be created to cater to those students. I'll do the discipline. ESA solve racist policies. Swap 17 problems. Alternative student-based system. And if we want to improve disciplinary outcome, then preserve the money on the kids' system is a good way to start. The principles that who face by excelling might do use of a different financial benefits student-based. Not budgeting school system more disruptive. Kids says customers be working not liability. Spot for entrepreneur early experiment. They say do not write your crime check to no side. Reforms can only do so much while your tolerant policy remain place with large schools. Negative potential discipline more serious than me. Parents take their selves or their schools and their zip codes are fitting the shows needs academic display. I'm going to read one more market good card. The market is best. Better 15 when the director educational principles provides parents and students to education unique interests on bundling education service allow for greater innovation diversity professional all classes. Now the traditional education system to be far more responsive to needs to radically alter how education for in the long term instead of centrality and many schools providers specialize in different subjects can be with education students. The Cal plan fails arguments. First is about disabilities, which doesn't apply because the app doesn't solve that. Second, it's not in the context of universal vouchers. That means more money would be given to kids like who have disabilities, which means there'd be an incentive to cater to those. Third is about vouchers. That doesn't apply to the counter plan because vouchers are worse than ESA. Small 17. ESA is more than voucher because they provide educational choice rather than school choice. ESA provide funds parents can use to customize their job and including college course tuning, special education service, get more consumer funds, increase the diversity of educational services, competition, price improvement, increase the value education services. States counterplan continue the permutation to both. I reject the argument of the team on theory. Any cross applications are new. Condo, it's good against it's good. Ace points innovation, based risk averse having a fallback track allows breaking new arguments. Second is dead flex to pick the focus of the base between arguments and compensate reaction ground. Third is info parsing multiple options for ESA efficiency. Best answer focus based on the largest half. Fourth is ideological flex. Only way to agree to K in the counterplan the same round. Excuse and double speed dishouse with that Tondo. Theory interpretations are arbitrary. Is it justified against a new app because we couldn't research in an interim counterplay to counter interpretation? How many ever condo we read? Forever. I think that was 3. At the top, probability first should be rejected. Trader Fred evidence says it allows for constant prioritization of ongoing violence instead of solving existential threats, which makes extinction inevitable. Probability framing should be interpreted as probability of offense, not the impact in the vacuum, which means you still weigh solvency of the app. There's no cognitive dissonance. There's a priority against extinction because it's never happened, which means you should overcorrect and weigh extinction more. Extinction comes first. VTL and value and structural conditions are contingent. Only extinction is permanent. Also, turn structural violence. That would be the dis long-term argument. Big impacts don't mean that we don't act, which is proven by the counterplan. The probability, yes, there are infinite things that might cause extinction, but you have to weigh that against the probability of the app. They say multiply internal lengths. That also takes out the app because there are huge internal lengths. Default to our specific internal lengths. Ace points the burden is on them to disprove us. You can't know a priori, which put local predictions, rely on false assumptions without going through the process of contestation. Second is they link more. The reason most predictions are bad is because someone comes up with an idea they think is gospel, then refuses to even consider the possibility of drawbacks to the idea. Yes, war. Trump's unpredictability isn't offense, rather makes more likely because it breaks down things like mutually assured deterrence, makes deterrence less likely. Nuclear war likely. Career 17. The risk of nuclear war sounds zero. There have been many accidents, close calls, human factors, including miscommunication, misinterpretation, psychology issues, unlimited death, and behavior based deterrence more effective, but also real and first strike launch. First strike launch. They have to contextualize yes war to impact before it makes sense for thumpers. These aren't courts, which means they don't thump the disads. Court or minimalist now. 1716. However, the Supreme Court accepts continuity will be off in novel directions. When recently involved this idea of respect for precedent, the many judges are drawn to judicial amendments and they focus on the fact that upon survey theories, constitutional law will pretty much have the same as it does now. The 1AR will get up and say they name random court rulings. It's not a question for the courts hears education cases, but how they rule. Deferring to local officials on how to run schools is necessary to solve inequality. It's true for the Roberts courts. We didn't know it. Majority of the Roberts courts likely share the view of the Constitution. Mr. Roberts, research of the Supreme Court's reluctance to empower education debates has surfaced several times. Advantage. At the top, the app can't solve school to prison pipeline. If we win this, it decreases their ability to weigh framing or probability. Ace points educational qualities of being internal literacy has a huge correlation to incarceration because it determines job opportunities post high school. These are TFA evidence. The only 2 AC answer is that it doesn't implicate it's an all cause. It still takes out things because even if you get rid of searches, there are still good support for racist policies. That plan does not solve funding inequity. Great expulsions proof. Curly 16. Overcome policy with underqualified teacher computer dropouts. Low students lead to criminal behavior. Higher income areas get significantly more funds. Our national incentive to boost students have performing lower performing students. Organized students. Course fail, baby. At the top, courts fail. Extended Robinson, they fail to create any form of equitable education policy. Ace points, they generate backlash from the public because they are viewed as a form of judicial order since Brown versus Board argument. Second, it judges lack the knowledge and training necessary to formulate an adequate policy. It means any result of the court ruling either won't be enforced or be 2 water round. Mr. Robinson evidence. Third is they can't allocate funds prophecy. When you see cross of litigation and financial litigation is enforcement, black evidences, they have no idea how to allocate funding, which means schools will know that and circumvent. Fourth is that courts are limited on money, which means they can only do so many remedies. That's what Robinson evidence. They'll defer to inaction and non-enforcement. Fifth is no expertise. That's a done evidence. Our argument is not that the status quo is bad precedent, but rather they misinterpret the app's precedent. What is a higher standard? What constitutes that? Courts have no idea what that means, especially in education policy, which means they won't do the same thing the app wants. Interest groups also proves this. The done evidence says courts can be swayed by interest groups in favor of things like searches, like private prisons, which can sway courts, which sees the rule against the app. Durable fiat doesn't apply. They fiat higher courts, not lower courts. No domino effect. Racist administrators don't care about courts. Also, all the evidence I did above prove that litigation fails. Our rights evidence says, but because school administrators aren't included in court litigation processes, they'll circumvent because they were never giving a court voice in the proceedings, which means they'll circumvent instead of getting rid of searches.
Good.
Yep.
ESA's counterplan, if one parent wants private schools to be heavy in security and searches and another parent doesn't, how does that fail?
They go to different schools.
So the counterplan is like create infinite private schools?
It doesn't create private schools. We've read several courts about how the free market works and says that if there is a large enough pool that wants things like higher searches, schools would
large
form.
enough pool. So it's based on the number that wants higher searches.
I mean,
what evidence says that?
Wait, that's not true.
What evidence says that if you have an ESA program, parents will raise so much outrage that every school is like, all right, no more searches.
We've read a lot of evidence about that.
No. You've read no evidence about searches.
Generic market existence is good.
Oh, you're talking about searches? No. The suave part is about racist school policies.
The argument about black students not going to private schools, so those private schools have searches. Yeah. Those students would then be at public schools that do have searches. So how do you
Wait, then what'd you say?
If you said in the 2C that students obviously who didn't want searches wouldn't go to schools with searches, in that case they're still at public schools which have searches. So how does that solve?
Because they can leave if they don't want searches, they can leave those public schools
and go where to the private schools.
To private schools.
Okay,
Yeah, they don't have searches.
That makes sense. That all gets back to the original circle thing. Framing. Is there a risk of extinction that is too low?
I mean, like 0%. I mean, like if you weigh the app's impact is good, and you weigh that against a probability of this ad, that is a calculus the judge must take into account.
So there is a 0% risk of extinction.
What?
There is a 0 risk.
I mean, if you win that, there is no probable scenario in which the app caused extinction. But we've made arguments about
But-
why
all right,
extinction
all right.
should be forwarded.
A couple more questions
and
based off
outweighs.
of that.
Yeah.
First is, does it have to be 0 risk? If we're at 0.0001%, you defer to extinction.
A few things. So we've made arguments about why extinction should be prioritized. If you win a 100% risk of case
Well,
and we win a lower risk of extinction, that should be still prioritized because the app's impact
my
is
question
irreversible and
worded
contingent.
Is to what point?
There's
If
obviously
we
not a
have
specific
95%
percent. You
chance
can't
of
name a
that,
specific percent either that the app would be weighed
but
against the
how
disapp.
low does it go? How close to 0 can you
Like
get?
how you want? I can't name a specific percent. We have made arguments
I mean, it
about.
just seems super non-falsifiable. It sounds like you're kind of always going to
I
be like, no
mean,
matter what.
every impact calculus is arbitrary and might not be falsifiable. We
Prioritize
have,
probability, not terminal impact.
no, it's a reason we've made arguments about why the impact should be prioritized over probability.
That's backwards. The Congress counterclaim, why does the new law matter if they've upheld the right to search under the
Okay, so these are two different things. The litigation that has
Yeah,
happened in
but one's more
SASCO
important.
has upheld the laws that states have that allow searches as constitutional.
Well,
That
no,
is
there have been attempts to regulate searches that have
no. Your evidence is about student litigation. It is not about the federal
There are
government
even
banning
policies
school
in Texas,
searches.
and we still have discipline.
What?
There are even policies in Texas that still have discipline in there. Like,
What?
I just don't understand if you have a law that goes against what a teacher is allowed to do under
No,
the
so
board.
okay, that's
Like, it seems like it's a.
so you're
premise
conflating two
question.
different things. Courts have upheld the constitutionality of school searches. That means that schools, in the absence of a law that bans it, can have them. That is correct. But in the word of the counterplan, a federal law preempts any
Yeah,
state.
I don't think that's actually.
That
how it
is
works.
true.
Okay.
Well, how do you think that federal government regulates anything unless it's unconstitutional?
If administrators
then Common Core would be
think-
unconstitutional.
If administrators think that they can take an action constitutionally, what is their incentive to comply with the counterclaim?
Because things like DOS, DOE enforcement. I guess not DOS,
DOE,
DOE
okay.
enforcement.
We'll take a second breath.
We have 7
Oh, ED enforcement, sorry. Oh, y'all probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, everybody knows that. It's just that since everybody says DOE, we just keep saying.
I know, and it's
You
also just
also-
like when you write the part of it and then highlight a card.
Yeah, exactly.
So I get it. I just like when I first judged this topic, I get to a bunch of
Actually, people to say non-things that consider
Can we stop for a second? Just like,
Yeah.
Yeah. How much do you have?
We're currently at 646.
And how much do we have?
You have, I have it written down.
Yes.
You said 511.
5
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah.
I'm close.
This was the first file that I wrote.
Earth?
No. Yeah, the first topic. And first thing I wrote.
That's hilarious.
Oh, wait, you're not prepping right yet.
No,
I'm not.
Okay, sorry, we're gonna talk.
Open Excel.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay, start. Wait. You can start right.
All right, resume.
I got it.
Good? 612.
I should write that on my page.
So orders, midterms, politics, schools decide. Yes.
I think it's safe.
Gotta get on my
Do you
wall.
think it's safe to get rid of teacher? Or am I gonna have to cross my tape again? I feel like I'm fixing it. No.
I don't know. It's too curious.
You said sorry.
What? I read the econ impact on politics. We simply solve the economy, then they deduct.
That's not allowed.
Are we good?
Okay, I am.
You're an egg. That's cool. Yeah.
Midterms! Midterms concede, half swing the election, or predictions fail, there's no offense. Anything that crosses the play is new and justifies new to in our answers. Politics decide concede, court shield, the Lincoln issues are environmental. Light say there's no offense. They said non-intrinsic is functionally a permutation. They said that takes all net ground, which is horrible for the net. Schools. Concession, the terminal impact level means even if the line by line is close, it still awaits the heightening on inequality, economic trouble, conservation, or nationalism, nuclear war. Turns the case. One is the poverty impact, which means we access the entire framing of the AFA, solving structural violence on a larger scale. Second is war. Turns things like structural violence that results in scapegoating as well as guns, butter, trade-off, any interventions are violent at a global scale, which outweighs the scale on scope. Third is educational equality, say prerequisite to the AFA solvency, because public school with the post-AFA gets so bad that it makes our harms worth. Fourth, it causes local backlash, which means states will enforce a regulation. The solvency hinges on the line by line. The court rulings now. One is the counterpoint solves. Second is courts are minimalist. That was 2 and C. Third is we have links specific to the AFA mechanism. Things like two-tier teacher units or enders don't matter. They haven't applied it. The enders case number it doesn't impact districts. So whatever McKenna's 17 districts will have a begin to impact the district. It impacts the district. Model schools already doing with the flexible tank to the diversity expertise of schools. The idea of ruling with demonstrating deference said it's a command 17. The court takes advantage of law is the longest substantive thoroughly present leaving a judicial interpretation of place shows congressional approval interpretation of last the enders to holding it back as a continuation prior to the truth of protecting the congressional power legislate. It will lead to less litigation in 17. The effective decision whether they got the local courts and school district future cases to the opportunity to address the level of different school district judgment might lead to earlier revolution instead of some disputes teacher unions case, which is their only other warrant any of their cards give. That it doesn't give students more rights, which is basically our link, and they also doesn't lead to more litigation over things like students' right, which is their second scenario. Their infrastructure trade, the thumpers trade won't go through or retaliate. It's just bluster. None of these arguments are applied to inequality. Don't do them for them. If they make new arguments, we get new two in our answers. Teacher bias argument counterpoint solves. Teacher bias doesn't answer our argument. The reasons why teachers disproportionately disciplined is because they're scared of getting sued by privileged kids. Deference solves the issue. Counterpoint disruptions are worse than suspension. Kids lose 13. Third is suspension, no person. Students are having committing and infraction, particularly students in post-grade are losing a classroom time to small negative impact on the performance and exposure to Trump behavior and influence to the achievement. They say a Trump lead makes inequality level. You can't just assert Trump without any warrant. Schools are sufficiently to bigger earnings, which is one is the evidence. It solves the other cause of inequality because it leads to a better job and earnings across the board. Only our evidence quantifies that they are ruling inevitable. One is the link debate. We'll clear that up below. Second is the courts and minimalist evidence applies. Third is none of the examples it gives are about students' right. Their evidence about financial transparency, adequacy, none of which apply to art. It's not just a court ruling on anything linked, but rather a specific to rights. Their next argument, I'll do all the link debate functionally here about the plain clarifies argument there. That quote from the 2EC is, we encourage and result in more litigation. That is the link. The argument that people will sue after the plain just destroys teachers' competence and things like discipline. That's the West card. The chilling link court rulings bolster student rights creates the chilling effect and discipline policy necessary to achieve serious learning in 396. Teacher have now lost what they're allowed to do, lost what the public state expensive, hardly realize even if they ultimately evade the murky standards that hardly give the teacher where they feel the loss of the comfort number of cases of their fault. They deal their temperature, they vague shape the concern rather than deal with the problem independently. Teacher will try to ascertain whether the court defines the distinction reasonable to avoid controversy. The direction of the due process which change may be practiced institutional at the excellence of the court's made some beneficial taking action. That's also the broader chilling effects I to the such judicial activity nonetheless like the education policy me whole city can say the economic consequence whether I knew variable must be excluded cross random and outside education policy if it finds all consequence influence education policy assume the other rights of link reality legal threats undermine teaching competence six students disrupt you can remove the student fair lease and the process more involved in the threat a lawsuit to make a small child and have anything put someone to make the decision have seen many chances in response to the court decision wave a lot of ground ability to control the school environment the decision way to motivate decide to avoid legal chance constitutional rulings making it possible to create the order necessary good schools block us in 15th there can be no codified presumption in favor of students right the concept of public schools constitutional rights and not easily recognized the constitution and chance to government minors the common law the public school the compulsion is schooling you want to predicate over the authority say ascription and limited constitutional rights of students on by debate so teaching authority takes on except their rights to responsibility might have minors to ascertain to the constitution may have custodian initiative teacher in the public schools market public schools they say the limit offers it spills over. That was Lincoln Barker would above court intervention lead to more intervention litigation, etc. After the limited officer, it spills over to other litigation, which is their scenario. It also leads to chilling effect for teachers on how they're able to discipline, which is the intro link. They say case solves the impact. The card above applies here about suspensions versus disruption. The counterpoint also solves their issues. It suggests about suspension issues. The plan doesn't solve all of the suspension that they list. Disruptions ruin achievement in future earning. Carol 16. The results into the impact of these disrupted appears to persist ready to adopt adding one student to reduce the high school test and reduce the earning 1 year exposure disruptions student feature, total feature. Wait, that's the one in C card. It reduces the earning by $80,000, which is the intro link. They say it spills over into other areas. Thanks for the link. Any other cards?
Yes.
Decentralization is best awesome. 16. The timing to reach or way to happen is spent in instruction is spent the disruption students one change to discipline to correct and free constant disruption to learning. Predict soul sentence suspension reach or drop it so the quality education teacher or also discipline to create new change instruction environment the price we pay. Mark that is the price we pay.
That is 10.
Good.
6-12.
Yeah, I returned it.
Oh, maybe?
Yeah, so now
No.
big uniqueness like this.
No.
Okay.
Let me. I don't think so.
I'm not deep enough to know, but I know that there was a thing about it.
Alright, 334. There are some cards on that.
What? How much? 345.
334. Yeah. Is it okay if I think the cards in? Oh, you have 510, we have 334.
Cool.
Is it cool if the cards are in the bottom?
Yeah.
Is that percent in that? Someone has said that before.
Oh, wait, you said that.
Yeah, there's
Wait, which shotgun was that?
the second one.
Nah. So, okay, there we go.
Oh, yeah, I have one card.
Oh,
Just send it up. Yeah, yeah. Just gonna send it down.
sound like it's just.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like us. But,
By the way, I put Ben's answer to Andrew on the D at that point. Right?
huh?
I'm putting this one back.
This is the first time I've ever been in Lexington, Kentucky, and actually eaten good food.
Great. You're moving up in the world. What did you get?
Yeah, I'm in the train.
Oh, sounds
But like I also took pizza last night, and then I had really been
sent 2 emails?
Yeah, there's another.
He's okay. He's moving around.
Yeah, unfair. I want
See what?
Yeah.
Theater is framing. Case. Thumpers, but I might forget to say thumpers because I put it up on the same page as table. Congress. ESAs. Schools.
Wait.
Yeah.
So framing case thumpers, but you might forget that. The other one?
ESAs.
Yes.
Hey, sorry.
And then schools.
I lost my blue pen. Oh wait, it's in my pocket.
Where's the case back on the TOC page? Oh wait, the one can extend it.
Did you want us to?
What?
I was another two black people.
No, the answer's no.
Oh,
He's wrong.
right. It's never too late. So.
Are we good?
Yeah. Sorry.
No amount of social violence is ever excusable. You should overcorrect your cognitive bias and prioritize body center. Normally better disposed by policy-making decision calculus. Existential threats are worse because they never happen, even if we only focus on problem X that outweighs because it's all more violence for the Jackson happens. Notice that that's kidnappings, complexity theory, intervening actors reduce each journaling chain by half, even if each argument's at 80%. That at best reduces the dissent to a third overall. The F is one card that establishes the entire link chain of the average results. The argument we have also disproved their specific claims by making a claim about broadly complexity theory. No more evidence is true. Trump enhances deterrence, which means he would lash out, and economic interdependence provides a disincentive. They've also conceded Coachon, which takes out the lash out impact of the incentive because he's devolved with military master and Tillerson and all create a disincentive against the lashing out. Now the case, proper educational quality is irrelevant or impacts or search of bad imprisonment, targeting the police officers, coach, so fails or it's about educational adequacy, not the act. The fact that reasonable suspicions enforced now disproves it in the context of the 1EC. Courts don't need to allocate funding litigation and being intended courts those that the HL or evidence expertise is relevant because the plan such probable cause where changes the letter of the law, fiat answers interest truth, and SCOTUS finds lower courts litigation does not fail and assumes the scope of the plan. In both two challenges, they have literally conceded advantage to the thumpers, the bosses establishing humanities under Title I and Title IX, which is the drop piece of evidence. I think Eugene Fu said the case. There's also cases termed that's a Bombay evidence. Friedrichs, the Detroit Board of Education, Andrew and Fried were liberal, and in 2017, which regulated education. The Congress counterplan perm to both. It links because it increases litigation, or it can't solve our entire jurisprudence advantage, which they have no impact even to, and it shields because it obviates the need for litigation in other areas. Perm to the counterplan, we never said where the court's 1EC classics of plan determines competition. Anything else is arbitrary, which they conceded when we answered their procedurals by saying that we weren't resolutional. That's a bad state or not Vegas. We're not the USFG. The deficits first strike down SCOTUS level reasonable suspicion and say all teachers need to do the counterplan change of state law, but officials know that they're allowed to keep searches on the Fourth Amendment. Ames argument about the new law does not change this because it's not about the court's interpretation of statute, but they've constitutionally said anything more than reasonable suspicion would overburden districts. Even beyond that, the counterplan violates the 10th Amendment by impinging on state education, which is literally conceded. Loco parenthesis is bad because entire season one is the reason that we shouldn't maximize local distraction to education. Cures evidence stored in science deduction. Never to correlate the results of the violations of resident degree achievement matters to justice. Justification. Qualified immunity is the second part of the argument. Students have to sue to enforce the counterplan because districts have a non-compliance incentive since they know they're protected by SCOTUS under adoption. Forum shopping means they will seek out Fourth Amendment jurisprudence post the counterplan. This suit will be ineffective because the counterplan creates more legal confusion, which runs afoul of the qualified immunity doctrine. Look, Aiden's a good debater, but he just dropped qualified immunity and the 10th Amendment arguments were both clearly flagging the 2EC. The ESA's counterplan permutation to both that results in that benefit because Aiden's solvency evidence is about increasing school quality, which broadly results in inequality more than searches detract from it. To get them out of public schools, parents would have to exempt, or the schools would have to exempt them from constitutional law, which removes all protections, and the entire opposite impact from that because it means resulting impact is worse in the terms of searches. The premise of choice is silly because parents don't make choices based on if their kid's going to get searched, and they don't even know that because schools don't advertise it. Frame it through the fact that they have no evidence about searches. Regulations just assume a lack of constitutional protection. Their evidence is also ridiculous. It's about ed quality but not searches, which obviously is not super publicized. This means if parents got ESAs, they complain about bad ed quality, which would increase that, but not bad searches, so it doesn't cause the market to change search policies. Also, schools can just advertise better searches and then circumvent that because there's no constitutional protections. Black students don't know which private schools search, so their parents wouldn't know which schools to go to. And if they have to keep moving, that's obviously bad because it means it's functionally pushed out because they're never learning in school, which R1EC happens causes health problems and decreases educational opportunities. The ESA solved racism cards not in the context of searches, and all of their cards are from conservative think tank hacks that analyze tiny studies and have no explanatory power. The innovation is that at the top.
Extend the impact of jurisprudence, like the examples of surveillance, drug policies.
Surveillance, drug policies, police brutality.
These are all things that there's not defense.
There's no defense to, and they've conceded. Innovation. There's no impact. Trade, tax reform, infrastructure outweighs. This is logical. No one says that it alone determines inequality. It's their burden because their cards are just like shit. Durable fiat solves or returns case. Arguments assume they win the entire dissent, which is silly. Uniqueness solves the returns case argument. The argument about increased funding once you have to change new tech developments is their warrant in the one and happens, so that happens post the plan. Their entry numbers is about congressional involvement increasing. It doesn't say it was more definite than previously, just then less than we thought it was going to be. I'll read more of it if I have time, but you don't get any arguments because you just messed up. Searches aren't key to disruptions. Also, our 1EC HLRF says the plan optimizes it. The link term reasonable suspicion is vague and meaningless, which means compliance costs are higher now than after the plan. The 1EC happens to justice for us, and it also means our non-core stuff for supply cases about compliance costs broadly. But the plan reduces litigation in schools because it solves circuit splits, but increases in other areas which they don't have a link to this disad about. The case also solves the disad. They've not answered this argument sufficiently. Rumberger's evidence says that status quo searches hurt attainment. Our evidence says that results in over $11 billion lost a year. Their Dupree card is out. I've inserted re-highlighting of this evidence, and their evidence is about TLO creating legal splits which cause teachers to have to find out what the reasonable suspicion standard meant, which diverted time from teaching their students. So you can read this card after the round, and you'll definitely conclude after. We're going to read it as a lecture card, but then they read it for us. Their Wilkes card is about unlimited constitutional rights, and the plan allows teachers to search with probable cause, which obviates this argument. The chilling effect is stupid. It is proven by our numbers about Boston Union's claim about inequality being high. Finance use thumb, Heisen 2, sexual school increases state school finance, the litigation finance, using state court as a chalk court. Yeah, McCaffrey, is your laptop charging?
I'm good.
But like, is it? Cause like,
Oh, is it charging? It had been. Let me see. Yes, it is charging. That was the system that we only implemented direct errors.
It only has a couple of those.
Wait, it was 1 hour. It was the 1 hour.
It only has a couple of those.
No, but it wasn't.
It wasn't. It was the 1 hour.
No, you make fun of Dina.
Oh yeah.
Because we expected it evenly.
I mean, yeah, the only two analytics are allowing the next read and impact them go back and see the impact of stat, literally the bricks debate, and all too easy stuff. And something.
I would normally agree. Coin the bricks debate as a substitute for actual impact. And I love it. I'm just like not gonna impact theory anymore.
Condo breaks next.
It's a contextual kind of
Yeah.
Everybody go from work. Congress counterplan, ESA's counterplan, schools disad, framing page, thumpers, advantage. Anybody not ready? The counterplan solves the outfit does 3 things. First, it bans school searches. Second, it bans immigration searches. And you knew 1 error contextualization what the jurisprudence advantage should be rejected through. It does in local parentis, that would be below. They say the counterplan increases litigation. Even if it doesn't increase litigation, it'll always be in favor of the schools, which is the in local parentis. Second, no, it doesn't. It's a clear standard, which means any litigation that occurs will be in favor of administrators and wouldn't sap resources because it defaults those standards, which means money wouldn't be taken away and there's no confusion, which means schools will backlash. Jurisprudence arguments. The counterplan solves immigration. The police argument was new and the 1 error should be rejected, and which means that we solve immigration searches and other areas. Permutation due to the counterplan. You should base competition off of 1AC cross says we base our strategy off of 1AC cross which allows them to shift in the 2AC spikes out of mid-ground and kills any offense we could have in the block. It's not arbitrary. You clearly said you defined courts when you were talking about the solvency mechanism. Vagueness is a voting issue because you can shift it out, which is proven by this counterplan. Strike down argument. Now, 3 things. First, if they win this, the other playing solve like in local parentis, they can see it results in more fair policies because the reason they don't search white kids now is because they're afraid of suing. The counterplan solves that by granting deference to the administrators. They also can see it reduces things like discipline to 2% because there's a deterrence of kids, which means they act out more, which means searches aren't necessary. Second is durable. Fiat goes conceded. Fiat is durable, which is key to both AF and NIC solvency against circumvention. 2AC said future courts can't reverse the AF. It's only reciprocal to say that courts would just ignore challenges in the word of the counterplan. Otherwise, Trump overrules every progressive law. Third is they are wrong about how education works. They have evidence that says searches are constitutional, i.e. that they have been held up in the access of federal law that bans them. The counterplan creates a federal law that bans those searches. The federal government can ban things even if it's constitutional. Courts have not held that administrators have a right to search. It's just that there isn't a ban. Congress banned guns in schools, required common core standards, and required certain schedules, even though there's no amendments to support any of those things, which schools could do whatever they want. The board that they say state education agencies circumvent. First is that this doesn't apply because we ban them. they can see that the DOE can set in. The reason litigation solves in the world of the app is because of financial instead of DOE can step in, which means there's no reason that litigation occurs, and they wouldn't circumvent because the DOE reverse funding local parentis argument. This is wrong. It just rhetoric evidence about studies that said it reduced things. Second is that this is wrong. Blatant unconstitutionality is still checked. They say parents they'll have to seek out ineffective litigation. This is not our argument. Litigation isn't necessary because the DOE enforces. They say the qualified immunity. Again, school administrators don't want the DOE to step in, which means there's an incentive for them not to obey the counter plan. The ESA's counter plan can see the permutation, just attest accommodation, cross applications are new and should not be justified. Schools. Economic inequality and decline causes war, two internal links. First is diversionary incentive to distract from the problems of poverty. Second is nationalism that results in countries electing more nationalist leaders, ensures extinction, turns against all of their framing arguments so that we should not prioritize high magnitude impacts. If we lose the frame today, we win because we access poverty across the whole U.S., which outweighs internal links. Second is war, turns structural violence, causes scapegoating of marginalized groups and trades off with social programs to fund war that access to structural violence globally through global violent intervention and exploitation that results in that. They say trade and tax reform. None of these matter. They can see that Trump was just blustering about how trade it will never go through. Tax reform didn't increase inequality. Poor people weren't affected in a worse position. Even if that's true, that education bad because it will lead to more attainment income. Even if taxes change, none of these are applied to inequality, which is our impact. They say new tech development. You decrease the funding to be able to do things like new tech development. The link debate. Now, the first, all of their reasonable sufficient link turn. The count plan solves this. The reason there are split standards now is because they don't know whether to defer to administrators or not. The count plan clearly tells courts to defer to administrators, which solves any risk of a link turn, which is problematic because this was like 45 seconds to the 1 AR, but the count plan clearly tells courts that those standards should be overruled. The link debate. I'll do it here. First is spillover. When I see cross-links, they spill over things like discipline because they're discriminatory. We've read evidence that goes to concede that discipline is key to stop students from acting out, which takes away from learning time. Those are 1 R, 1 NC evidence. Second is student effects. Teachers have no idea what core policy is. The app signals to them that discriminatory policies in the future will be struck down, which decreases the likelihood that they'll use discipline in the future because they think students will sue them. They will say no spillover, but teachers have no idea what the plan does. The one I see had a broad spillover impact, which proves that teachers won't discipline, even if that's a result of the plan they think it is, which is all the chilling effect cards. I read, they say legal splits. That was answered above. The count plan solves that. They say suspension is bad. Only we have comparative evidence on this. Even if suspension and expulsion is bad, consider evidence says that disruptions affect comparatively more people and ruin the overall school and the school attainment, which is why discipline is key. They don't solve the suspensions card. Teachers will do other suspensions that lead to push out. We saw what any difference means. People don't get pushed out because they're disciplining on race because they're scared of litigation. Heist. The key distinction between school finance litigation and litigation that the AF invites is that finance litigation is based on funding schemes and transparency, but litigation based on student rights actually terrifies teachers. The framing-based cognitive bias goes negative. The reason that because extinction has never happened, there's a reason to doubt it, which means you should overcorrect. The intervening actors, they have to apply this before it makes sense. So it's not one argument that we have one card, but rather extinction should be prioritized. They can see a value to life that's subjective and inevitable, and that probability focus makes extinction inevitable because there are always infinite structural violence that can be prioritized over things like extinction, which are only a permanent impact. Trump argument. We have evidence that says, first of all, we have evidence that says inequality would make leaders, even his administration, more likely to lash out. Second, Trump has decreased things like mutually assured destruction because he's so unpredictable, which means you should hold the line because we have specific evidence about inequality in studies. Thumpers. We have first is mandates don't thump. They don't hurt funding. Even if the boss is enforcing them, they're not courts, which means schools will still be likely to discipline. Second is the Andrews argument. First is the count plan solved this. Even if there was a liberal courtroom, the count plan reversed that precedent. Second is that we've read two evidence that was deference to schools, which proves that litigation will decrease in the future because courts have upheld that. If there was a permanent count plan, it links because it uses courts. Advantage. I'm only extending interest groups because the 1 AR are just as durable fiat. Our argument is that lower courts who interpret the app's precedent will be swayed by interest groups like the private prisons that like things like searches, which means in the word of the count plan, they won't know how to do that and they'll be persuaded by things like that. Second is that they can see that courts can allocate money. The reason litigation is effective is because it takes away money from schools. We've read evidence that courts have no idea how to spend that money, which means administrators are circumventing the word of the plan because they know courts have no idea what they're doing in education, and courts are low on money, which means they can never take away money from schools.
334.
Start working on it.
Okay, advantage, thumpers, framing, counterpunch.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that?
Yeah, advantage, thumpers, framing, counterpunch. Okay. Anyone not good? Litigation outweighs reasonable suspicion searches show precedent across other areas of fixed cases for the Fourth Amendment broadly ineffective. Lynch, Olson, and Nance say that results in massive structural violence and destroys the ability for students to nullify other discriminatory laws like surveillance, harsh drug policy, and police brutality independently. Searches are a bigger impact because they cause psychological violence and physical violence against students in schools outweighs because it's faster and happening now. Durable fiat does solve interest groups because it ensures compliance and they be held in contempt of court. Litigation also checks that they don't have about the app and our slow evidence is good and says the plan motivates effective students. Precedence low now and the status quo would increase after the app. It's very clear because it's written in the letter of the law. Money doesn't matter because you can just take things out of schools like your remove officers doesn't cost money. But for other Fourth cases of which still solved cases are pending in the status quo. The thumper stuff, tons of education cases are happening now. Bombay says rulings on teacher union, school finance, political buttons, and more education funding and renovations also increasing. You can see the one argument that this does matter because it still triggers a perceptual link in fear of teachers. For this, they've increased by over 1.2 billion. The Andrew case also still matters because there was more controversy than the status quo, even if it wasn't as unprecedented as we expected. There's very little bribery between the app and other cases now, so a small risk of litigation occurring is enough to move this out. Framing prioritizes probability because it maximizes logic and decision making. Any other framing is bad. Any action could hypothetically cause extinction, but complexity through an intervening actor means that you should have an inherent skepticism and reduce the risk of all it is had, even if you think that each component is individually high, 80% union is 80% from the link, etc. Multiplying them all together reduces the risk to a very low number, which is a mathematical reason to or affirmative. Cognitive biases go aft because you're biased towards the imagery of extinction when structural violence accumulates over time, which Jackson evidence causes more deaths and violence and war in the long run. The intervening actor stuff does make sense to the context of this head because the WTO, other nations, Trump checks, etc. have an incentive to intervene. Probability does not make extinction level because the above reasons there's no incentive for escalation. Trump decreases the propensity because other nations fear that he's a rogue actor who will press the nuclear button. It encourages deterrence. It means that nations won't turn outward even if the economy is going low. Checks exist now. The encryption evidence says that Trump has devolved to military leaders, hotlines, Congress, etc. And the triumvirate surrounding him with the military create an incentive for them to keep inwards because they know that Trump's a rogue actor and create an incentive. This is sort of a two levels impact defense. Other nations will lash out because they're afraid of Trump lashing back, but domestically will keep Trump constrained because of devolution. The Congress counterplan at the top, permutation do both. There's a double bind. Either A point, the counterplan increases litigation, which links to net benefit, or B point, it doesn't. It can't access any of this lower stuff. The lower stuff is not new. It was dropped into the 1 and C. You wouldn't require the 2AC. You wouldn't require the 2AC to go through every single impact the 1 and C doesn't answer. Plus, it was in the 1AR. It's justified because they haven't answered our evidence from the 1 and C. That gave the example of it. Or B point, it doesn't increase litigation. It can't solve this lower stuff. C point is the permutation also shields. There are no need for suits when Congress takes action in concert with the court because it would clarify and pass a law with them. There's no disagreement, which solves all of our solvency. That means the permutation also acts as double solvency, so it's a tiebreaker in case we win. In case they win the dissent, we're going to need the framing stuff. There's no judge kick argument in the Trufanov. You shouldn't kick it for them because it destroys fair advocacy and is unfair, forces to answer multiple worlds. So winning the part of the counterplan is sufficient to be this said permutation due to counterplan. The 2AC said that non-resolutional procedurals are bad because they destroy predictability and are arbitrary and unfair. The 1AC cross-ex did not figure the courts, just that litigation could happen if the students would sue after the app, which isn't the same as saying we get a SCOTUS ruling. It avoids arbitrariness because it maximizes the incentive to debate over the content of the app instead of the process, which is better because it focuses debates over the good or bad actions of the plan. It's not vague because it specifies the resolution that was conceded as the 2AC. It's best because anything else is unpredictable and pushes the burden too far towards the negative. It cannot solve the jurisprudence scenario that matters the most because the impact that I explained in the case. There are pending cases now and students are suing in other areas. Public advocacy campaigns are also trying to take down broad Fourth Amendment rulings. The Lynch evidence and the Olson evidence says that it applies to discriminatory cases across the nation, including things like surveillance, drug policy, and police brutality. Immigration doesn't matter because you still have other impacts. It can't solve searches because it causes more legal confusion. Not going for strike down, but the QI stuff means that if they don't increase litigation, there's a non-compliance incentive for administrators because they know they're federally protected under constitutional law. They might fear the counterplan, but they know they can push it to federal courts, which our evidence indicates would be ineffective for students because the law wouldn't be held to be clearly established. So, 2-1 is much better than their evidence question. The dissent proper. There is zero explanation of an internal link or coherent impact in the tuner. They've done a good job establishing why economic decline causes war, but not how schools are the bedrock of economic decline. Other factors, logic logically outweigh and should be prioritized if we win any of the arguments and framing. There are tons of exogenous things that affect the economy much more, like Trump's tax reform plan, which did pass and should affect inequality to some degree, as well as the economy more broadly, as well as trade tariffs on China, which actually happen, infrastructure, and the propensity of the economy to fluctuate due to business cycles. It doesn't turn the case. Durable fiat ensures education can't get rolled back. Funding doesn't matter for the litigation stuff of the AFN. War turning structural violence rather than winning the entire disset. We have a couple. It turns out our evidence is pretty good on. First is the Dupre evidence, which Aiden doesn't really answer in the 2 hour. The re-highlighting and truth inserted in the 1 hour is much better, and says that reasonable suspicion is murky right now. Teachers already fear litigation because students are suing against searches now. The problem is those suits are ineffective. The plan decreases litigation in schools because it sets a clear standard that searches don't need reasonable suspicion, but increases litigation outside of schools if they don't have a link to by the whole flow stuff that I explained above. Teachers don't know applies to status quo, not to the app anymore. Disruptions might be bad. The discipline is worse. There's almost evidence in the one evidence in the Chase case that it affects over $11 billion the economy and ripples across multiple sectors because it decreases student achievement and causes low growth in the long term.
Plan's a middle ground. So
The plan's a middle ground because it's more clear than the status quo, but not unclear enough to trigger the link.
Congratulations to everyone in an excellent tournament. The decision is unanimous for the affirmative. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly say that you all are absolutely fantastic. I can't tell you how much joy it gave me to judge this debate because the clash, the clarity of arguments, and the very obvious just love that you all have for debating is so great to see. And thanks for that. And you're going to be a badass in college, and I'm excited that you are going to Emory because I love Emory. So I think that the permutation resolves pretty much all of your offense. This is frustrating for me because I'm just not sure it's true, like IRL, but I'm searching and searching for kind of an answer besides just links to the net benefit, and that's really all I have. And the reason that I think that's problematic for you is because if it is true that it's possible to both change the way that a local apprentice is enforced through Congress and also possible to do the AF, then there is no link to your DA about litigation. And I'm sitting here writing my neg ballot and I just can't figure out why it could possibly be true that the permutation would lead to more litigation in schools because of some signal that litigation was forthcoming, if it's also able to change the in loco parentis standard, which you have said makes it such that people do not have an incentive to sue. And maybe there are like a few instances like grasping at straws in some of your link evidence, but it's really nothing I would feel comfortable quantifying if I had to explain a neg decision to the AF. And I think at that point, you don't have really any offense that I can identify. That's the short of it. I have a lot of other thoughts about kind of the substance of the DA, because I actually started there and thought a lot about whether there was any risk of the DA at all. But when I started thinking about the counter plan, I couldn't come up with a neg response to the permutation that I thought really got to an offense.
I agree with all of that. I thought that okay, I'm not gonna actually repeat anything. Okay, so a couple other areas in the debate where I thought the 2NR, didn't quite close the door. One was util. I think that the escalation debate it's almost decisively at, really. And if that's the case, I, then have to kind of resolve this, like, impossible to quantify question of like what amount of suffering does the disad or does the uneg ballot resolve in comparison to what I think is like pretty like solidly one risk of a great deal of suffering in other areas, because I do think they win the best student advantage as well as in the schools. And the disad is basically just a function of the impact of the advantage. The other big question that it was the very first thing I resolved, but even now I'm like factually uncertain what the 1AC said and whether or not they were the court. But based on my flow of 1AC cross-ex, I do not have them saying that they are the court. And if that's the case, the rest of the way the perm to counterclaim debate is debated, I have to vote on perm to counterclaim. Like the only theoretical offense that the block makes is like a shift voter and not like some kind of other theoretical argument. And the fact that there was like an A-spec and a not courts T argument, both of which speak to that exact same question and to said things about that the block conceded, means that like they can be the counterclaim. I think you need to make an argument that local parenthesis, and I honestly don't know enough about the law to actually know if this is true, but I think you need to make the argument that in local parenthesis lowering the test, and the text of the plan says raising the test, and that would be why it's severance. Yeah, those are really the two most important.
Yeah, definitely agree with everything that's been said. I also voted on the permutation. Didn't really think about the risk and disadvantage that much, although I do agree with McCaffrey that there were some substantive issues as well coming from the debate on whether or not a war was likely. The way that the severance argument should have been phrased is that because the plan, it's not even that there is a standard that is established by the plan, or that the plan raises a standard. It's the standard that is established by the plan is under the Fourth Amendment. Is I think the place where you should draw the distinction, because in local parentis, given that it means that schools act as the parent in that situation, means that the students are not given any constitutional protection from the intrusion of privacy by the school, just as like a parent has the ability to search any property of their child at any time. And like that could be like a kind of analogy that you could draw. And I think in fact, given that the plan says Fourth Amendment and that it raises the standard for what constitutes a constitutional student search under the Fourth Amendment, in fact, I do think that the permutation would probably have to be severance. But as is, I agree that the 1AC cross-ex never said that the plan was done by the court. The phrase that I would float is that litigation would be the enforcement mechanism, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be the court acting in the first place. It would be Congress establishing a law, and then there would be like a private right of action that is used as the enforcement mechanism for that. Vagueness was something. The problem was that the 2NC conceded the 2AC's argument about the arbitrariness of non-resolutionally based app obligations. But I also agree, Blanc, I've really enjoyed judging you over the past 2 years. You're going to be a beast. It's been a pleasure.
You're going to wreck Trufanov. One thing I think that created these problems for you all, because every time I've seen you, you've been more efficient than you all both were in this debate. It's just that you really have to go for the majority of the block in the 2NR, which is just so tough. I mean, the 1AR in this debate is just, it's pretty awesome from an efficiency perspective. And I think that in close, just tech counterclaim debates like this, it can be tough starting from that point. And so I think the way that maybe you would choose to narrow this debate, instead of biting off this whole we have an extinction impact, util, consequences, whatever, just be like, screw that. The impact that we're going to go for is about economic inequality. I'm going to explain to you 3 different scenarios in which our litigation link would cause a student teacher relationships be super screwed up, would cause the same type of abusive behavior for underprivileged students that the APTAs matters, would be really bad for racial minorities, students with disabilities, etc. And a couple of contextualized examples. And it just gets rid of like these 2 minutes with the 2&R where you have to do all of this really monotonous impacts debating that honestly just isn't going to matter, because the debate, no matter what happens with all of that, mostly comes down to these very technical link questions, because you're not going to win like a massive risk of the litigation causes inequality, causes nuclear war, DA. But those 2 minutes could really make a difference for you in the link debate, and I think that the way that you're talking about the link debate ends up being weirdly connected to the way that all of this permutation stuff plays out, since the way that litigation would occur is so connected to both issues.
For me, the low probability of the thing could have been resolved by just reading more cards about why education matters for inequality. And like those cards, like I've seen those articles, they're really good. Like if you have a really, really good explanation of why education is the biggest reason why there's inequality and like, but like you never really go into that explanation. You kind of blow off their all causes. You could have had a much more potent uniqueness press that is just like, given the trajectory of schools and given how the quality of education is improving and given how the counterplan, creates new flexibility for educational institutions that would empower schools to be much better at solving a bunch of these things, then like your story becomes much more plausible, and you can like even use the existence of Trump as a justification for that, because you could say, oh, this Trump will be solved by the trends that are unlocked by the counterplan and stuff like that. But I don't know. All of that depends on how much stronger education is to solve inequality than maybe the general conference.
Well, big for you all before you go into the finals throughout the spec. So be careful about that.
There's just the like any procedurals thing that you was saying.
Yeah, I know, but I wouldn't answer it more explicitly given what we just lost on.
Yeah, that's true.
No,
Just like me and face.
dude, I'm just telling you, I wouldn't want to lose the final.
I would have voted on that.
See? He's probably judging the finals.